But as you know, recently I got a comment on TikTok and I was breaking down how the human behavioral system works, where we said beliefs come, then the beliefs are just the lens through which we see the world. So if I believe the world is rectangular, I'm going to perceive reality through that belief, right? So it's as if our consciousness is this white light and our belief is the filter. So if I have a belief that gives me red light, I'll see the light. I'll see the world through red light.
Right.
I'll have a blue light filter, see the light through blue. So we all have the same source white light, but we're seeing different colors all over the world.
Right.
And that is partly why we get different outcomes, right? So the truth, you could say those who see the world truthfully, it would be having a filter where the light is just pure white. Right? It's no. But when you have a belief, it taints the filter slightly. And that's why I'm big on finding out what's true, not what you believe. Beliefs are irrelevant in the face of truth. We don't need them. But since we don't know everything, and it's easier to say I believe something than to say I don't know, here we are as people.
Right.
But that aside, I had a recent TikTok comment and he was like, oh, that's the operating system for women, right? Because men don't operate on emotion. And when I saw that comment, I was like, this is a common misconception that I even had at one point in life. Men don't operate on emotion. Now, I know what he was trying to say. And I think there's a misconception about the relationship between logic and emotion. Excuse me. A misconception between logic and emotion that it's important to clarify. Because logic and emotion are actually intertwined, not separate individual entities. Obviously, emotion is more associated with the feminine principle of the universe, right? Flowing and ever-changing. And logic is a changing constant, the masculine principle. And so him going, men don't operate off emotion, is true and false, right? And so I want to bring it into the context of just what the dynamic in an ideal sense, in terms of the where a woman is feeling the most amazing and a man's feeling most amazing tends to be. Now, this can vary depending on what both parties want, but typically speaking, considering the feminine principle of reality is that which is adaptive, flowy, and creative, and the masculine principle is that which is initiative and structural, right? It provides the structural backbone of something. So if you look at something like the atom, the structural component is the center, the proton, and then it's surrounded by a cloud-like field of potential, the feminine, that's infinite potential, right? And then the electrons pop out in and out of the cloud. It's a little scientific, but those who do know the nitty-gritty of the atomic level of existence will be like, right? And then we see that dance on the largest scale known to human beings, which is the galactic level. Galaxies have a central black hole, or a central part, we'll just put it like that. And then surrounding it is infinite potential, right? Constant change and changing constant in the center. And so the axis is typically thought of as the masculine because the axis is what stabilizes the system. Right? Even in dance, we talked about before, the masculine typically represents the partner that is the stable place, and the feminine represents the ever-changing dynamic part of it.
Yeah.
So if we go back to logic and emotion, logic represents constant change, the masculine. Emotion represents changing constant, the feminine. And so it's reasonable to then assume that men should operate on logic, women operate on emotion. However, when you dig deeper, you realize, just like everything in the universe, they're intertwined, the yin-yang symbol. And so what I did was I responded to him and I was like, that's kind of the truth. I know what you're trying to say, because it wasn't as if what he was saying was baseless.
Right.
But there were fine-tuned misunderstandings in his understanding of how things worked. And so that's what inspired today's video. So before I get into logic and emotion, we're going to go back to the ideal situation with men and women, right? Where women, the feminine, if you have a feminine woman, right? Because a woman can be more masculinely oriented, meaning she wants to have complete governance over the direction of her life, meaning she's focused primarily on being the governor of herself and all that comes with, how to put it like this, she is primarily focused with prioritizing freedom and her sovereignty over softness, right, and comfort and flow. So the masculine prioritizes growth and expansion over, you could say, flow and beingness, right? The softer state, ease. The feminine prioritizes being able to flow and being a softer state of ease. Then it prioritizes expansion. So women will tend to align with the feminine principle, and men will tend to align with the masculine principle. That's why when a woman encounters a man that violates that principle, where he's not expanding, he's a deadbeat, he's just da-da-da-da, there's something about it that she doesn't want to commit to, even though she can't put it in language. Similarly, when a man encounters a woman that, I don't need no man, I've got this, da-da-da, you see, there's something off-putting about this that I can't put into perspective. I can't quite put words to. What she's missing is that ability to go with the flow, and to flow, you need to let go of control, right? And so for something to flow, it must be contained by something else. That's why a river, before a river can flow, is contained by the pathway of the ground, right? And so there has to be a structural pathway that masculine creates that container for the feminine to flow through, the structure. But if a woman is like, I'm going to offer my own structure and I'm going to prioritize structuring myself, then she can't flow because she's prioritizing structure. So for her to go into the flow, someone else needs to be providing the bulk of the structure, at least when they're together in a space. Right. That's why a lot of times you'll see those memes where a woman's like, when I'm around my boyfriend, my brain is just unstructured. Because she's with a man she trusts to handle the structure. I'm a protector to that. So she's allowed to go in that flow state of just being and focus on what the feminine is typically interested in, which is the internal experience of life. Whereas the masculine is typically focused on the external structure. Right. If we look at like very like an archaic reality where if there was a village, men tend to be outwardly focused on expansion and expanding the structure of the village. Right. That's oftentimes how wars come about. A masculine oriented force is trying to expand into another territory. And so it's like, whoa, I'm not going to just let you expand into my territory, and then therefore war emerges. Whereas the feminine is more focused on the internal experience of the village, the relationship, the community. It's not as much I need to take over someone else's land. That's not the feminine focus. So those two are balancing energies that are necessary. And so in a relationship, a woman is usually looking and seeking that flow state. Now, with modern times, a woman can now structure her own life, something that was more difficult or impossible to do back in the day. Right? We have technology. She doesn't need a man technically to provide food for her because there's a Walmart. We have civilization. we have the DoorDash, we have so roles that men would have typically been necessary for 300 years ago, right? They went into the wilderness, into the unknown. They expanded into the wilderness, risked, right? Because with masculine is risk, with the feminine is security and safety. They went in and risked, came back with the spoils and shared it with the feminine within the village, the women within the village. Now that's not really as necessary at all anymore. And so civilization has provided the structure that males used to provide. Right. And so now the male in most women's lives have become the Walmarts, the government, the police. And so a lot of men, the roles they used to thrive on are now systematized. And so we have a generation of men that are feeling lost, and we have a generation of women who are more sovereign. And so as a result of that, the sovereign women and the almost aimless, visionless man can't coexist, because for a woman, she's still seeking that soft flow state, right, no matter how sovereign she becomes, because the more sovereign she remains, with sovereignty comes responsibility, with responsibility comes stress, right? And you can't flow under stress. Yeah. And so after a while of carrying that on her shoulders, most women will seek a space where she can flow, right? However, for that to happen, she needs to pair with a man she feels she can confidently and comfortably trust that okay, you can handle the structure. Right. And so why is that not happening often? Because the guys are like, well, I don't know what women want anymore, because they don't need us for cash, they don't need us for da-da. And so what most women are seeking, I've said this before in previous, I think, an article before, women are seeking men who are sovereign over themselves, that have a vision that she aligns with. So, okay, you can take care of yourself, you can take care of your own world, and you have a vision for your ideal world. Right. And so if a woman is already sovereign over herself, she's like, okay, when she enters that man's world, she wants to see what his vision is. And she's like, oh my goodness, that vision is something I can align with. Then she would then support that vision, because if she does not go in a supportive vision and she tries to lead the man, and this is where it's going to come down to the emotion and logic conversation, if she tries to be dominant over the leadership role, then what she's gotten is a son, another responsibility. And it kind of defeats the purpose and still goes against the nature of the feminine, which is flowing within the structure. So now what she's done is she's taken on another responsibility, and the man is going into the flow. But because it's imbalanced and unnatural, she'll resent him for it, and she can't explain why. And if the man doesn't know enough about, and which a lot of men, not to any fault of their own, have been uneducated about this dynamic, will, like, why is she so, why doesn't she trust me to lead? Why doesn't she? And it's like, because she perceives you as unqualified, right? And so a guy's like, oh, well, maybe I need to prove. No, you don't need to prove yourself. You need to be yourself. And if you're a leader, if you show up in that way, you're not going to follow her anyway. You're the one who established the vision, and she comes into support. Because she does not support, she cannot go into flow. And so oftentimes that's what a lot of women don't understand. They are looking to support, because you can't be in the leadership position and flow at the same time, because leadership means I am going to be going into the wilderness. I'm going to be initiating that. I'm going to be pioneering. I'm going to be taking on the bulk of the risk, which means I have to take on the bulk of the responsibility and stresses of failure. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly in a state of stress and pressure. Mm-hmm. Right. So most women hearing that, like, oh, hell no, I'm not trying to have that in my relationship. Right. So what most women are looking for is a competent leader who has a clear vision she aligns with, so she can support. Mm-hmm. Right. without losing her sovereignty. Right? So she's not a slave now. You are both submitted to the vision, but he's the one leading it. So he has to submit to the vision. She has to submit to the vision, but he's going to lead and she's going to support. Because whoever is going to lead will be bearing the responsibilities of all the failures and stresses.
I don't know no woman that want
I don't know too many of them either. Right? And if she's with a man that's like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. You want to take on? Oh, bet. She's going to resent him after like 2 weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Because something about it will feel wrong. Right? And she's like, you're a deadbeat. You said you wanted to lead. It won't work. And then if she encounters a man that it has that natural dominance and lead to him.
Where she can't even question it.
Right. Yeah. It'll be, finally. Right? I can exhale. And so most guys would hear that and go, that's not logical. They operate on emotion. And where this comes into play is that it's understanding that every emotion has an underlying logic, and every logical decision has an underlying emotional motivation. Right? So they're actually tied to each other. So it's like, okay, well, what makes the difference between operating logically and operating emotionally? And it comes down to something called time. Right? Time and intensity. There are other factors too, but to simplify it, we're going to simplify it to time and intensity. So when a woman is quote unquote, or somebody's considered to be operating emotionally, it means the intensity of the emotion they're feeling is so strong that they can't think very far into the future. What they're feeling in this moment is the ultimate truth, which is the feminine's nature. Right? I'm feeling this right now. It's the weather. It's rainy today, it's sunny tomorrow, it's snowing the next day. None of those are less true because it's not consistent. Right? It's a ever-changing constant. Right? And so the intensity of her emotions in that moment, women have, or the feminine has women have greater emotional intensity than men. But it's not that men are emotionless. Right? What he's saying when he says men operate for emotion, he says men naturally have a lower emotional intensity about most things. And so the gap between, in this moment, I'm considering making a decision. When it comes to most things, the intensity will be less. And the kind of just awareness of life, the detachment, the ability to just go, okay, I'm feeling the desire to do something in this moment, but it may conflict with something I want in the future. And that's where I saw intensity and time. What logic is the ability to determine or make a decision. Right? So, okay, I want to do this in the future. I want this. However, in this moment, so I have a piece of donut on the table. So I have a donut on the table. I really want to eat it, and it's really intense in this moment. If I eat it, then somebody can go, bro, that wasn't logical. You said you wanted to fit in your wedding suit, in 3 weeks. Why would you eat the donut? Right. And then you could say, oh, you operated from emotion. Right. And then let's say somebody, same guy, donuts on the table, wants the donut, doesn't eat the donut because he's like, I want to fit in my wedding suit later. And it's like, okay, that was logical. But the thing about it is that both are motivated by emotion. Right. what logic allows is for you to assess which emotional payoff is worth more to you. So if I want the emotion of the pleasure of the donut on my tongue right now, and I want the emotion of looking good in my suit. They're both emotionally motivated.
Right.
But what logic allows, or the decrease in emotional intensity allows me to consider future possibilities, even though I emotionally and intensely want something right now.
Okay.
So the feminine is concerned with the present, the masculine is concerned with the possibilities. Right? And so it's like, okay, this emotion is intense right now. I want to do this right now, but I'm able to put this emotion under wraps for an emotion I want in the future. But it's not emotionless.
Right.
And similarly, let's use the donut example. Let's say that person did eat the donut and we look at it, that was irrational. That was illogical. We could go, yes, but let's say that person ends up a week later getting in a car accident and is in a coma for the next 3 years. Then if we reverse that, we go, okay, well, if they knew they were going to get in an accident the next week, actually the more logical decision would have been to eat a donut.
Yeah.
So depending on, in every moment we're assessing that. Do I make the immediate short-term decision? We kind of always are assuming we're going to live into the future. So it's like, okay, if I delay gratification, that's logical. But if you don't know when you're going to die, it can also be illogical. If you delay something too far, right, and never, quote unquote, act on emotion, that has a level of illogicalness to it because you don't know when you're going to die.
Right.
And you don't know if you're going to have the opportunity. You don't know where your health's going to go. You don't. So people looking back at life often go, man, I should have done more emotional things. Meaning what they mean is like, I should have acted on the intensity of the emotion in that moment. I delayed the gratification too much. That was rational, logical, because I assumed that when I got to the future thing, the payoff of that emotion would justify all the sacrifices I made.
Right.
Right. And there are people who always act on emotion, immediate gratification, immediate gratification, immediate gratification. And in the long run, they're like, man, I wish I had more self-control. And so that dance, the masculine represents, right, sovereignty. The feminine, you could say, represents the depth of experience in the moment. Right. So the masculine about self-governance. The feminine is about self-expression. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's all about, I want to express and experience, which are in this moment right now.
Right.
The masculine is like, let's detach from just the present moment and look at it in like, okay, let's go down this timeline. What about this time? What about this timeline? What about this timeline? What about this timeline? And so when a man and woman come together, that dance is happening. Sometimes we as men need that juice of life, which is what the feminine represents, emotionally and just in general. Whereas like, if it was just in my rational brain, I would have never taken this adventure, would have never gone on this trip, would have never. And women need that rational long-term thinker that can go, nah, baby, we're not doing that. We have this, and this goal we're working towards. But it allows for that dance to happen without either person going too far out of their innate energy or their innate nature. Because if a woman is doing that for herself and containing that, then she gets to experience less of her feminine flow because she always has to think about the next step.
Right.
So she very rarely gets to express an experience. If a man is always just acting out of emotion or the present moment, then he never gets to build into anything, and he's what people call a loser.
Yeah.
Right. So there has to be that dance, but they're actually intertwined. Right. Every emotional decision you make has a kind of logic, which is true. You don't know if you're going to get another chance, which is true. It'll always be true because we can never predict the future. And in the logical, again, more detached from the present emotion, not detached from emotion,
Yeah.
detached from the present emotion. We think about, okay, well, which emotion will matter more, the one I'll get now or the one I'll get in the future? Mm-hmm. But everything we desire, everything we do is because we expect a certain feeling at the end of it. So if I want to go to Paris, it's because of when I go to Paris, if we ask why, it'll go down to because it'll make me happy. It'll make me feel good, peace. It'll make me feel content. It'll make me feel excitement. It'll make me feel whole. It'll make me feel meaning, fulfilled. There is a feeling at the end of every action, every motivation, everything within the masculine desires a feeling at the end of it. Right. But that feeling oftentimes requires action in the real world. And so the feeling can't just exist without any action, which is the masculine, right? Without any logical thought. And so that's partly also why when women think about acquiring relationships, they'll have a more, let me focus on becoming more alluring and have the man initiate.
Yeah.
Whereas when males think of it, they go, I need to become super valuable so the women I initiate with will be receptive to me. So a man's usually thinking to expand his pool of options, where women are looking to dial in on the man they want. Right. Yeah. To dial in on the specific kind of guy she wants to end up with. So to kind of look over again, logic and emotion, masculine, feminine, the yin and the yang are bound to each other. They're not separate technically. Even in explanation, we can explain them separately. Right. But every emotional action has a sort of mechanism underneath it that you can, okay, that's logical. If somebody explained it, why they made that decision. Logic isn't which one is the most right, because it's hard to predict that over a long enough time horizon. Right? If I go, okay, well, I ate that donut, which led to a series of things that helped me change my life. You could go, well, eating that donut was the best thing that ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. And you can go, oh, well, I didn't eat the donut. I did this and this, and I should have just ate the donut. And so it can look like, oh, not eating a donut was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it could look like eating a donut was the best. It just depends on how it plays out. But because we can never predict the future, that's the variable, which is where the masculine and feminine comes in again. We can't predict the future, which is a constant, ever-changing constant, right? But the future is a constant change. So it's also part feminine, part, and that can go into a lot of quantum physics of wave and particles and all that. Yeah. But the reality is both, and it's in flux at all times between both the masculine and the feminine, infinite possibilities and a concrete reality, right? We say all the time that reality is the absence of potential, right, and potential is the absence of reality, right? If something is in reality, then there is no more potential. If something has potential, there is no reality. And so they need each other. They're bound. And so what is a man to take from this, right? When you have a woman and you're leading a family, your job is not to be emotionless. So as we talk about, the sovereign man is actually very in tune. Right. Your job is to not allow the emotions of the moment to always dictate your decision. Your woman is naturally going to be more like that. And in fact, if she's not like that, she's going to feel more masculine. And if you're a masculine male, you're going to prefer feminine women. If you want a feminine woman, she's going to be more flowy, which means she's going to move more into the moment. You can't have unless you want a man with a vagina, right? I'm pretty sure that's not what you want. But if you want a feminine woman then the feminine is not something to say, I wish it was more like masculine.
Right.
And same with women. If you want a masculine man, he's going to be more structured, more forward thinking, more expansive, more. And you can't go, well, I wish he was more like a man with a vagina.
Yeah.
Right? I think I might have said that. Or
a woman with
a woman with a penis. There we go. So it's like, we have to understand fundamentally the differences between each other.
Yeah.
And embrace it and understand that they balance each other out.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm dealing with women, right, guys will be like, how do you deal with all the women? Like, it's normal for like droves of women to be in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like breathing. That's because I understand their language. I understand how they think, they operate. And so when you understand something, it's very difficult to be upset with it.
Yeah.
And then when you realize, what would I prefer them to be like males? Then I'd just be surrounded by men.
Right.
And most guys don't want a feminine woman who acts masculine.
Mm-mm.
So it's like, okay, well, if I want a feminine woman, then I have to understand what comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to show up and understand what she needs to remain like that.
Exactly.
And vice versa for a woman. If you want a masculine man, I need to know what he needs to continually show up in the way that I want. So if you want to stay in that flow, don't fight for the steering wheel, right? Because if you start driving the car, you're going to want to go into a different vehicle where you can be back in the passenger seat and go back into the flow. And as a man, if you want to be the one in the passenger seat so your woman can be feminine and soft, then you can't go and throw off responsibility on her for the mistakes you made while driving. Right? That's just, you got to take that. We talked about last video, accountability, responsibility. Right? Who's going to fix it is responsibility. Who suffers the consequences is accountability. Right? Who's to blame? Who caused it is blame. And so as the leader, as the one that drives the car, you get the authority, yes. And you get the responsibility, yes. And the guy actually who inspired this video, he left that in the comments, so I wanted to throw that in there. That was I liked how he put that. Right? And so that's pretty much everything from this one. Yeah, that's just something I wanted to ramble about.
Nice.
And so, yeah, another ramble of the week. Hopefully it helps somebody.